I have been playing Mass Effect since day one of release all the way back in 2007. Before that, I was a fan of BioWare thanks to games like Knights of the Old Republic and Jade Empire, and Mass Effect only cemented that love. And as a whole, I love the original Mass Effect trilogy, and Mass Effect 2 is my absolute favourite game of all time. But there's no denying that these games have problems, so I thought I'd look at some of them today. Now remember, these are just my opinions and this is all in good fun and none of them get in my way of enjoying this game. But before we get into the video, I just want to say I know I said I'd be doing an Insanity Tip video for Mass Effect 2 and 3, and I am working on them, but it's taking longer than I expected. So to satiate the Mass Effect craving in us all, I thought I'd do this fun little video. So with all that out of the way, I'm Craig, this is Amalgamingle, and here are my top 7 problems with Mass Effect 1. Starting off my list is only a small but simple issue I have with the game, and that's the backtracking. Now, I'm not faulting BioWare for this little gameplay quirk. This game has to establish the new worlds that BioWare have created, a brand new IP with new locales, people and places to explore and talk to. If you've ever played BioWare's other games such as KOTOR or even the Dragon Age games, then you'll know all about the backtracking problem. At first it isn't so apparent in Mass Effect 1, the problem becomes apparent after a few hours. It's a bit of a pain going around these places. Sure, the Citadel has a lot of fast travel spots, but a lot of the time where you need to go is nowhere near where the travel spots are. Well, of course that brings us to the elevators. This isn't just limited to the Citadel. Feros and Novaria also have elevators, but these are the only places you can return to if you want to. And unlike the Citadel, you cannot fast travel anywhere on Feros and Novaria. In fact, Feros is probably a good example of this. When you arrive on the planet, you find the colony under attack by Geth forces. Your first major task is to clear the Geth in the tower before you can move on to the Exogeny headquarters. You can do the task and then head for the side mission stuff, or you can ignore the main task and just go straight past where the elevator is and head down a ton of stairs and through a lot of corridors and gangways where more Geth are, as well as the objectives of the other side missions, such as the Varan food issue, water supply issues, and a jamming tower. But if you don't know the game like the back of your hand like I do, and you want to complete all the Feros side missions, you'll end up going up and down those stairs a fair amount of times. If you only want to stick with just doing the main quest on Feros, you have to take the elevator down to where the Mako has magically spawned and take that up to Exogeny headquarters, fighting off the Geth on the way. And this isn't some simple straight line either, you have to go up multiple levels and along a very long destroyed road fighting Geth along the way. And once you've done all that, you have to drive all the way back, with freshly respawned Geth. And if you want to do the easily missed side quest for Gavin Hossel, you have to go all the way back to the headquarters to get what he wants, and then go all the way back again. Thankfully, Novaria, Therum and Vermeer don't have any backtracking, but when you're on the Citadel, best get those running shoes on. You're gonna need them. Next up is something that's a bit of a mixed bag for me, and that's the romance options available to you in the game. There are 3, Kaidan for Femme Shep, Ashley for Male Shepherd, and Liara for either of them. Now, I'm not critiquing the romance options themselves, it's more the way you can activate them. The way this works is the way it works in pretty much every BioWare game when it comes to companions and squad mates. When you first get a squad mate, you get an initial amount of dialogue. After that, new dialogue is triggered by a multitude of factors, going to new locales, completing side quests or main missions, and so forth. But for whatever reason, the triggers in Mass Effect are a little all over the place. For instance, Kaidan can be a pain to talk to and get to know. You can try and do the aforementioned triggers, but a lot of time you get the dead end dialogue option with him. Ashley is a little easier to talk to and she really has plenty to say, but can also be annoying if you choose the wrong option, and she gets vindictive very fast if you accidentally pick a dialogue option that says you might be interested in Liara. The problem here is that the dialogue option isn't clear that that's what you're saying. Once you do this, you have officially severed your romance option with Ashley unless you load the previous save. And Liara is all over the place. She says she doesn't have much experience talking with humans, and boy does it show. It's actually quite adorable watching her try to navigate your conversations, especially not understanding a joke, but it doesn't take her long to profess her attraction for you, which you can either reciprocate or turn her down. But again, for me the problem is that it can sometimes feel punishing if you only want to talk to these people in a friendly manner. Thankfully, this was something that BioWare made a lot better in Mass Effect 2. Like my first entry, this is only a minor quibble I have with the game.
That's a whole new spin for on the floor and give me 20, huh?
Over at number 5 is the one thing that's the most prominent across the majority of the game, and that's the combat. No matter which one of the 6 classes you pick, you are limited to 4 weapon types: pistols, shotguns, assault rifles, and sniper rifles. And that's it. Now this wouldn't be too bad, but it doesn't matter which weapon you choose to use because they all pretty much handle the exact same way. The first Mass Effect game doesn't have ammo. Instead you have an overheat bar above the weapon icon you have, and each weapon has a certain amount of shots you can fire in rapid succession before it overheats and you have to wait for the red bar to drop. Now, the shotguns and sniper rifles overheat the fastest, but to be honest, pistols and assault rifles are the better options when it comes to combat because their rate of fire and overheat bar are usually higher, meaning you can get more shots off before you have to take cover and wait for the gun to cool down. But the problem is that it's just not fun. It always feels like something you have to just get through to get to the next thing. All the guns feel the same regardless of whether or not you have the most powerful version. After a while it can start to feel monotonous and you can easily zone out. The only time the combat can be a little bit more enjoyable is when you're playing on any of the harder difficulties, because enemies take a lot more hits and you have to actually think about what you're doing. And that's just the guns. The tech and biotic powers at your disposal, while fun to use and can definitely help you out of a jam, are just as awkward and as stiff as the gunplay. To access any of these powers you have to access the power wheels, which can instantly bring you out of the combat. Sadly, this was something that even the Legendary Edition couldn't fix. Like many of the issues I have with this game, the guns and powers were vastly improved with Mass Effect 2 and 3.
Yes, is there something you want?
Why are you so...
Next up on my list is honestly something I think all free games suffer with, and that's side quests. Each game has a decent amount of side quests to complete, but none of them are ever really memorable. The only ones that have any staying impact in this game is the Cerberus missions you do relating to Admiral Kahoku, which become available once you become a Spectre. But these are only remembered retroactively because Cerberus have a more prominent role in the next 2 games. But the rest are really just kind of there to pad out the galaxy and the places you visit. There are no memorable characters from any of the side missions, no great moments except for the fresher more attacks, but you can also encounter these randomly, so it doesn't have the same impact as being a one-off scripted moment like Grunt's loyalty mission. And this is a real shame given how much effort went into making this universe feel alive. Even on the Citadel, the largest part of the game has a lot of side quests that you either just ignore or just skip through the dialogue. There's an undercover sting operation at Cora's Den, but you just go in, talk to someone, talk to a CSEC officer, make an exchange, and that's it. You don't get to see the intrigue of what this operation is about or what the outcome might be. Or to use another one, the Biotics who take over the ship and hold the chairman hostage because of some bill that means these people aren't getting the treatment they need. You never get a follow-up for this beyond a little message in Mass Effect 2 from the chairman if you manage to save him. Just a few more bits of dialogue or a scene where you're contacted by the chairman or even the Biotics would have brought more life to the quest and made the game feel just that little bit more lived in. The other reason why the side quests are so forgettable is because Mass Effect 1 reuses a lot of assets for its locations. Pretty much every ship you find in the galaxy look the same on the inside, with only the layout of the boxes and storage containers changing as well as the enemies within. Then there's the bases and settlements on the planets you can visit. There are 2 variations you'll quickly see. One that is a giant warehouse and the other is an underground bunker complex of sorts. And this also applies to caves too. This becomes really apparent if you try to complete every side quest and visit every location you can in the game. And this is the big missed opportunity of this game for me. For a game that sold itself on freedom and exploration, it's a shame that so many places look the exact same no matter where you are in the galaxy, be it interior or exterior.
I might just be starting to like you, Shepard.
Consider that record as good as broken.
I'd wish you good luck, but I don't think that will be enough.
In the top 3 now, and let's hit the ground with a big one, DLCs. There are 2 that were made available for the original game, Pinnacle Station and Bring Down the Sky. And for the Legendary Edition there was only Bring Down the Sky because the original version of Pinnacle Station was corrupt. And honestly, if neither of them were added to the Legendary Edition, you never would have known. Pinnacle Station is fine for what it is, but it gets repetitive very quickly. For those of you that don't know, Pinnacle Station is just a DLC that adds a space station in the middle of buttfuck nowhere and focuses on the worst gameplay aspects of the game, the combat. But not in that you are fighting against hordes of enemies, well, you sort of are. Yep, it's a combat simulator. You get a few levels that are based on main mission areas such as Therum and Vermeer, along with a few others, but that's all Pinnacle Station is. It is a combat simulator where the aim of the game is to beat the high score for each level and type of simulation there is. The only part that's actually memorable is the final simulation you complete, but the reward isn't that great. You get an apartment to visit, but this doesn't really amount to much as none of the Mass Effect games have this sort of mechanic. I mean, you get an apartment in the Citadel DLC for Mass Effect 3, but that comes with stuff to do, squad mates to meet up with, and it's also connected to the Silver Sun Strip where you can do all sorts of mini games, including a much better combat simulator. But the apartment in Mass Effect 1 is just a place you can wander around. You can't sit down, you can't look at anything except out the window, it's just a place you waste time in. And that brings us to the other DLC, Bring Down the Sky, aka Operation Bruce Willis. Like Pinnacle Station, this DLC can be accessed as soon as you're given command of the Normandy, and this one at least has a little bit more urgency. Batarian terrorists have seized a science outpost that are operating out of an asteroid, designated Asteroid X-57. The plan by these Batarians is to launch the asteroid right at Terra Nova, one of the most developed and densely populated human planets. So it's up to you to save the day. You have to run around the asteroid, disabling 3 of the engines that will put the asteroid into a drift instead of a deep impact course with Terra Nova. Overall, the DLC isn't too bad. It's just not that memorable really. You fight a lot of turrets, some drones and Varren. The Batarians are a little different as you don't come across them in the base game except for a codex entry which this DLC redesigned the look of the species. But besides a choice at the end, there isn't all that much to the DLC. You can choose to save the hostages and let the Batarians go, or you can kill their leader and sacrifice the hostages. This has no impact on the game, and it isn't until Mass Effect 3 that any of your choices are made apparent. Thankfully, Mass Effect 2 and 3 both made up for this by having truly great DLCs.
You did it. Another hour and our course would have been irreversible.
My penultimate entry is one I wasn't too sure about putting on the list, but I would be lying if I didn't include it. And that's Liara's mother, Matriarch Benezia. Everything about this character makes no sense to me. She acts as Seren's right hand, but you only see her once before you confront her in Novaria. The game never tells you how these two came to be indoctrination buddies, but the thing is, she's not needed at all. You could take her out of the game and it would make absolutely no difference. You'd think being Liara's mother would have a greater impact on the story, but it really doesn't. You only have a couple of extra lines of dialogue with her if you take Liara with you for the confrontation. Liara doesn't really say much when you first get to Novaria, and you can either choose to believe her or leave her on the ship. But even Liara being there doesn't change the outcome. No matter what happens, you will fight her, her commandos and the Geth, and then she dies. Depending on the difficulty, it can be a bit of a tough fight, but not with her. Despite being a matriarch and a powerful biotic, you fight her lackeys more than you fight her. Even when she gets her second wind, it's not much of a fight, especially if you're quick enough with the combat wheel. The game tries to paint her in a sympathetic light, saying that she was trying to move Seren down a less destructive path, but of course the indoctrination of Sovereign stopped that. Not sure what that path would have been, since it's really unclear just how much Benezia knew of the Reapers before Sovereign's claws were deep in her brain. And there's another reason why I don't care about this character, and it's probably the most controversial thing I'm going to say in this video. I don't think Marina Sirtis is a good actress. Now don't misinterpret my words, I am not attacking the woman herself, I have got nothing against her. From the interviews I've seen, she seems really nice and down to earth, and I love The Next Generation as much as the next sci-fi nerd, but I have never seen her give a good performance. Her line delivery in this game is just so woefully bad. She always sounds like they recorded a table read and they couldn't be bothered getting her to do another take. To be fair to Marina and even Benezia herself, BioWare have always struggled to have compelling villains in the Mass Effect universe.
Die!
And now we're at my number 1 spot. And if you've ever watched any of my other videos where I talk about this game, you know exactly what I'm going to say. The Mako. To use a very British phrase, this is a marmite of a game asset. You either love it or you hate it. And believe me, I am definitely in the hate camp with this stupid 6-wheel wonder. So, where to begin? Well, there's the fact that if an incline is too steep, then it doesn't matter whether this thing has 6 wheels or 66, because it will either go up the hill very, very slowly, or it will spin its wheels and eventually just slide down until it reaches a level surface. And the reason this is a problem is because you need the Mako if you want to explore any of the planets that are off the beaten path. The playable area on these uncharted worlds is enormous, and many of them have environmental hazards, making the Mako essential in keeping you alive. And many points of interest can be found in craters that are hidden away over craggy rocks and ridiculously awkward hills that you have to jockey around to reach whatever thing has appeared on your minimap. And I think BioWare knew how awkward this tank was to control. Why do I say that? Well, on Novaria you have a lovely flat surface to drive along, a nice road that's clearly marked with just get in your way, which you can pretty much ignore if you want, or there's Theron, where you might go up an odd hill here and there, but it's nothing that the Mako can't handle. But Theros is another matter entirely. As I stated at the top of this video, there is a lot of backtracking here, and the Mako was not designed to make some of the turns it has to when going from the colony to the Exogen headquarters and vice versa, and that's also not counting any of the obstacles that are in your way. And if the Mako hits the wrong thing at the wrong angle, the bloody thing can flip and roll all over the place. I will say that as a tank it does a great job. It can take a fair amount of damage, and its turret and machine gun attachments can be a godsend when playing on the higher difficulties. Thankfully this is the only game in the trilogy you control this stupid tank, and I dread every time I have to get into this stupid contraption. Put me firmly in Camp Hammerhead. Bonus entry before we end. How the hell did Seren get on Sovereign? We see Sovereign take off just after Seren gives Nihilus a splitting headache, and then a cutscene plays where he tells the Geth to destroy the entire colony, and then he goes over to the Prothean beacon. So how did he get to Sovereign when it had already taken off and left the planet? There aren't any teleporters in the Mass Effect universe? Feel free to debate that amongst yourselves. And there we go, 7 problems I have with Mass Effect 1. You might have noticed these entries aren't all that long, but that's because as much as they're my personal issues with the game, none of them really take away from the enjoyment I get when playing it. So let me know how wrong I am about my choices and what any of your problems might be. And don't worry, I am still working on insanity tips for Mass Effect 2 and 3 for those interested. I've been Craig, this is Amalgamingle, and thanks for watching.